Dear colleagues, students, teachers, dear guests, this will be a kind of introduction to what you will see and what you will do with the theme we proposed for this our jubilee meeting. The title of my story is The Town and Its Bridges. Ljubljana is one of the new cities in which it is possible to unreveal a whole series of appearances from the very varied extents. Anyone only slightly acquainted with the city and is seeing something of the character of its growth cannot, of course, be expected to distinguish these historical images one from another. On the contrary, they leave one on the top of another. Later growth, so to speak, sprang from the old, sometimes so heavily overlaying it that the original exterior cannot be detected as a facade. Only an experienced eye can recognize where are the remnants of the former layout of the city, and it takes archaeology to shed more detailed light on finds deep in the earth and to clarify why the city has such an arrangement, such divisions, such a progression of streets and not some other. Ljubljana contains traces of its historical appearance from Roman times to present. But let's see what happened before. The first dwellers of the territory of Ljubljana were lake dwellers. In the south of Ljubljana there was a lake, a big lake, a shallow lake, and people formed these platforms, wooden platforms, and the cottages on them. And they create a boat made from one trunk, and they move along that lake. And at the same time, they invented a wheel. And this is one of the earliest wheels in Europe, going back to 2000 BC. This was found in the mud of the lake and was recently stored in Germany because it was very, very fragile material. Later on, in the Iron Age, so that lake dwellers were living in the Bronze Age from about 3000 up to 1500. And later on, the people abandoned the platforms on the lake and they settled the tops of the hills around Ljubljana Basin. The Romans left us Emona, an ordered town laid out of Roman colonial style and on a perfect site, predominantly level in the basin between Krečič and Ljubljana River. So in the far distance you see the Ljubljana River, and since we are talking about bridges, see how the first bridge left the eastern door of Emona, the path went over the bridge southeast of the Balkans. During the migrations of nations from the 4th to 6th century, Emona was destroyed many times and finally abandoned. However, the ruined walls of buildings and especially remnants of the city wall remained. So this is the situation of Emona, and on your right side you see the composition of medieval structure. When the Slovenians again began to use the space between the castle, here on your right, and the Rožnik here on your left, for urban activities, after some hundreds of years, they started to build, besides the Ljubljanica in the narrow space between the castle and the river and extended across the water with a new market laid out along the eastern line of the walls of former Emola. The earlier town axis, Decumanus Maximus, so you clearly can see how it works. So, this is probably the oldest part, sorry. This is the oldest part of Ljubljana, which was not, sorry. Thank you. With the name Starita, Old Market. The first town was the town market. The first settlement surrounded by the wall, and the next settlement was New Market here on the left bank. See? That's something. What is exactly on the same line as eastern wall of Emola. So the Decumanus Maximus was in fact used again in the Middle Ages as a link to the streets going to the Mediterranean to the south. The earlier town's axis, Decumanus Maximus, as I told you, the old Roman road remained as a city link with the route to the south. Cardo Maximus, you see this north-south orientation. The town north-south axis became important later, when the town began to extend toward the west and north, and is today a backbone of modern Ljubljana. So, Roman town, at least from the beginning of the 13th century, is followed by medieval Ljubljana, with a typical medieval structure of growth. A traveler, that's proper, the traveler of Middle Ages described it as three towns. Old Market, there on your right, Town Market in the middle, and the New Market down, with a mighty castle crown in the hall. The castle where we are at the moment was a crown of the city. And from this old map, made by an Italian, Niccolò Angelini, you can see the oldest bridges of Ljubljana. The oldest bridge is, of course, this one. The old bridge, as it was called also in German, Alte Brücke, was here, and as a strategic one. The castle upstairs controlled this special strategic position because it was the only connection from the northwest to the southeast to the Balkans. And there was an internal connection, connecting just two parts of the town. This was so-called a new bridge, or later on called Shoemaker's Bridge. It's a wonderful plan. The date of the plan is late 16th century, but shows exactly the medieval structure of the town and all of the fortifications around it. So this is the structure of medieval. You can easily find the more geometric proper New Market because of the line of the wall of Emola, and the very organic Old Market and the Town Market to the north. But this is typical medieval structure of Ljubljana. The Renaissance brought new forms to the town, like beveled walls and corner turrets. Now, just one exception is the Castle of Ljubljana, the only building you can see Gothic elements. Here, behind that line of the turrets is exactly this hall. You see the turrets on your left side of this hall. See from the outside, late Gothic turrets making order in this front, this facade, looking down Ljubljana. So what happened in the Renaissance period? This, They brought new forms to the town, like the beveled walls and corner turrets, influenced, of course, by castle architecture. The process started when the narrow townhouses were joined into larger buildings, into mansions with newly arranged courtyards, and this process continued in the Baroque. The Ljubljana Baroque is completely new town concept. So this is another type of these Renaissance turrets, and now we see what Baroque contributed to Ljubljana. So this is completely new town concept, which, in addition to new Baroque palaces and parks, in the surroundings of the town brought similar palaces and churches to the town itself, and even modest 2- or 3-story medieval buildings were given a new Baroque appearance. Even more, the former northerly German aspect of the town streets, certainly because of the narrow high fronts of the buildings, which looked into the main squares and streets, were there given a fashionable Baroque appearance, with reoriented ridges of the building that raised the town by the whole story, and soft, smooth execution of the central town arteries with the characteristic Baroque features like fountains, domed belfries, and ornamented facades. So this is a nice site, a typical Baroque ambience of the town, of the beginning of 18th century. And of course, 2 beautiful drawings showing Ljubljana as a town of belfries, domes, and of course, if you want to be oriented, exactly on the right side you have this remnant of Cardo Maximus, so this north-south orientation. So this is the side to the north, so this is the side from the north to the town. And another such a beautiful expression of Baroque Ljubljana is this. And with help of one of Krečič students, so this is a map of Ljubljana of that time, so mid 18th century. I wanted to show you because here we have another bridge. So the oldest one, as I said, is that in the middle, the old bridge. That is the connection between the town market and the new market, as later Shoemaker's Bridge, and another one there on the right. This is the Bridge of St. Peter's. But from this graphic print of the famous Valvasor book, The Glory of Carniola, we see at the big picture of Ljubljana on the left side a small bridge connecting 2 banks of the river close to St. Peter's Church, which was in that time in this shape. And with the help of Krečič student Dušan Grabljan, he invented that Ljubljana got in the Baroque period something what we can call it a typical Salzburg reducto. So the vision as you could probably experience already in Salzburg. So what happened in the 19th century? This. The 19th century brought to the city avenues of trees along the main access roads. Town squares and parks, such as Congress Square and Zvezda Park, were created from the monastic and aristocratic gardens. The railroad, which came to Ljubljana and continued on Trieste, here we have the main still old railway station. This brought an essential change to the life of the town and its appearance. Ljubljana industry sprang up with its, and by it, even great industry, creating a new town alongside the old. This is the old Kozar's brewery complex, a tobacco factory. This is nearly a Versailles factory-like in the conception of the Versailles. So we got such very interesting factories, examples, and there were many, many other small ones. At the end of the century, Ljubljana was devastated by an earthquake which accelerated with the renovation of the town, and that is planned growth onto the new land. And this was Max Fabiani, who was the first important town planner who proposed a powerful development for Ljubljana within the ring road on the Viennese model. And in this context, particularly accelerated development alongside the newly delineated Krečič and Prešeren streets. But let's see some examples of this historical architecture. Like this is a famous complex of buildings. From the very beginning it was called Café Europa. Then the county assembly, immediately after the First World War, became the center of Ljubljana University, the main building, and the main post office built at the end of the 19th century. And a new Gothic example of the Church of the Sacred Heart of Jesus as an example of so-called new Gothic. And this is something what Max Fabiani contributed to this town. So his idea with the ring road around the castle, and a special plan for the northern part of Ljubljana called Visegrad, the northern part closely attached to the development of the old city, as seen in the eyes of the planner Max Fabiani. So Fabiani planned, as you see from this image, the new town for the northern part of Ljubljana, Visegrad, but at the same time a district tightly bound to the development of the original extension of the one. The interwar period was a time of a strong cultural development of Ljubljana. The transformation of the city from a former regional center, another provincial town, into a national center with a whole series of new central national foundations, from university to administrative building, from culture to business, health and sports. Soon after the end of the First World War, Jože Plečnik came to Ljubljana at the invitation of the newly found university. So this is something what Fabiani created in the heart of the town with the Palace of Justice behind and the beautiful Slovenian Park in the middle. So the next great planner and architect was architect Jože Plečnik. He got an exceptional role. He got a task with a series of arranged features and new buildings. He completed the extent appearance of the city and parts following the tracks of Fabiani, but also planning anew, according to his own ideas. His great attempt was to create a new Ljubljana as a new Athens. And in about 20 years, he saw it realized in its main features. He prepared two general plans, one from 28 there, and in 1943. He also embarked on an urban plan for Visegrad, exactly on the ideas of Fabiani. However, the city web which Plečnik built from the old town outwards, characterized by his own individual buildings and feature even very small elements like monuments, park benches, lights, and boundary stones, is something so distinctive, so inescapably part of the city that interwar Ljubljana can be justifiably be called Plečnik's Ljubljana. See some examples. The National University Library, the Church of St. Francis in Šiška, maybe two key important buildings in Ljubljana. And now, what happened aside preaching? So, preaching's productivity, which gave the main seal tempo to the city development, was paralleled by the work of other architects with the different architectural views. The skyscraper complex, the skyscraper complex, Dukish apartment blocks, the former Batya building, so back now is called Nava, Batya building. However, the city web, which Plečnik built from the old town outwards, so this is something that was much, much more powerful. Nevertheless, we've got beautiful examples of modern architecture with the skyscraper, with the small skyscraper, with the architect Hermann Hus and other architects. So what happened after the Second World War? The whole country needed to be renovated and modernized. Ljubljana became the center of the Republic of Slovenia within the Yugoslav Federation of 6 republics. In the outskirts of the town, the new heavy industry complex occurred like this, and this was the architect of this was Edo Michels, and of course the new residential areas of the new coming workers and public servants were needed. The architects followed the new promising modernist ideas, and the leading personalities of the Ljubljana School of Architecture became in majority Plečnik students, and among them especially 2 leading figures. One was Edvard Travnikar and another was Edo Michels. Edo Michels started with this. Edvard Travnikar contributed in the 70s and the 80s the complex of the place of Republic, the towers and the markets and so on. The modernist era was followed by a brief period of postmodernism, and at the end of 70s, at the beginning of 80s, and later by deconstructivism and the new minimalism. Let's see some 2 or 3 examples. One, so this is the side from the north, looking to the skyscraper, the apartment block by Edo Michels, and a tower made by Milan Mihelic. Now the famous building of the Chamber of Commerce made by Sadar and Duga architects, and another example of Perović-Bjerg architecture is the mathematics building in Ljubljana, the School of Mathematics. And this is just a brief view on the bridges in their historical appearance as a historical line. So this is the now triple bridge, Tromostan. As you see, the fortified bridge with the 2 wooden sheds on each side on the wooden bridge. Later on, it was seen from the embankment of Ljubljanica, the steel construction made of wood, and after the First World War, the stone bridge as a central bridge at the starting point for bridges arrangement with 2 bridges. The second bridge was a wooden bridge of Shoemaker's Bridge, as you see, completely covered with wooden sheds on both sides. Later on, replaced by the iron one, the mid-19th century. The third bridge was St. Peter's Bridge. St. Peter's is here on the left, and in the bottom of the image is the new factory for sugar. Later on, the bridge got a parallel bridge for the tram, Trnava with the church, and the small bridge across Gradaščica River. The former Butcher's Bridge, made immediately after the city walls were torn down, And you see that, that there was no street. Later on, Fabiani made so-called race still going directly to the railway station. And at the beginning of the century, it was replaced by the Dragon Bridge, you probably already know. This is the bridge connecting the Ljubljana River by St. James. St. James is there on your right. And as you see, the first bridge was wooden, later on immediately replaced by the stone one. And later on, at the beginning of the 20th century, replaced by the concrete, one of the first concrete bridges in Ljubljana. And this is something what connects the story with Peter Krečič. This is his bridge as a bricklayer bridge. Krečič's sluice gate made at the end of the 30s, which is not a bridge. The bridge is just a small, maybe a meter broad path being hidden behind these three towers. And it is, of course, a wonderful example of a perfect scenery for a certain event you are going to plan. The path to the footbridge to the fish market, the new butcher's bridge, the corn bridge made by Boris Podreka, a Viennese architect, Slovenian, coming from Trieste, and then he made a beautiful career, wonderful career in Vienna. And again, the iron bridge that was moved from the place, from the eastern part of Ljubljana to a new place into embankments with, of course, Krečič's arrangement on the both sides with that cones, with the lights, perfect solution for the old iron bridge. That's finished. Thank you very much for your attention.